Hello, my name is Julia, and today we're going to be painting a glow tree. I'm going to call this Glow Tree 1 because I'll probably end up painting many glow trees. We're using an 11 by 14 canvas, and I have a size 12 round bristle brush, a size 12 pointed round brush, and a little detail brush. This is a size 0 pointed round, but any little detail brush will work. I've got some paper towels, a cup of water, and the acrylic paints I'm going to be using today are Liquitex Basics. So this is titanium white, we've got cadmium yellow, Alizarin Crimson, this is a tongue twister, Quinacridone Magenta, we'll just call that Magenta, Phthalo Blue, and Mars Black. For this painting, of course, it's very easy to just switch up the colors, so don't feel like you need to stick to this color scheme. It's kind of just a very basic technique. This is a really simple, easy painting. Even if you've never painted before in your life, this is a great one to start with. So we're going to start off with our size 12 bristle brush. We're going to dip it in our water, and you want to make sure that you take your other hand and you squeeze out the excess water. This brush holds a ton of water and you don't want it to have too much in it. So I'm going to start off with just plain white paint. So I'm going to grab some white, and you want to kind of eyeball where you want your glow to be. I'm going to do mine kind of smack dab in the center, but you could definitely do it off center. And I'm going to use this brush, and I'm just going to paint a white circle. So it's about 2 inches in diameter. It's just kind of the size of the brush going in a circle. Now I'm going to mix up a pale yellow. So that's a tint. Whenever you add a color with white, and white's the main color, that's going to be a tint. So I'm going to take some of this white, move it off to the side, and I'm going to add a teeny bit of yellow. A little bit goes a long way. You can always go back and grab more if you want to. And you know, honestly, I said cadmium medium yellow, but that looks a little bit too neutral, and I'm feeling in a very bright mood. So I'm actually going to use some primary yellow. So you can stick with the cadmium yellow deep if you want to, but I want something a little bit brighter. Yeah, I'm feeling bright today. So I'm going to mix that up. And while this white paint is still wet, I'm going to start to do circular brush strokes. So I'm starting out around the white in the middle, and I'm going to go out further than I actually want the yellow to go. So I'll go out a few inches. And now as I'm starting to kind of run out of paint, I'm going to come in here to the center, and I'm going to start to go over the white, and my brush is barely touching the canvas. I'm not pressing down super hard, and I'm going in a circular motion. And the only part that I'm not really touching is the very center, but even that you can kind of go over, and you can see how it's kind of blending in with the white. And just make sure that you take out the yellow a little bit further than you think, and make sure that your paint isn't super thin so that it's not drying right away, because if it dries right away, it's not going to blend very well. Okay, so now I'm going to clean this brush out. I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to press it against the bottom of the glass pretty hard, spin it in a circle, and then make sure that I squeeze the excess water out. And the reason I love this brush for backgrounds is because it doesn't paint too thick, so that you can actually, you know, keep moving on with the painting. You don't have to wait for a long time for the background to dry. So that is why I kind of love this brush. So now I'm going to get in there with a little bit of, I'm going to start with the alizarin. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that. Again, making a tint, I'll grab a little bit of white. I don't even need to blend it all the way in. Just kind of pick it up, and I'm going to go out around the yellow. And as I start to brush over the yellow, I can do shorter brush strokes. See how my brush is kind of lifting, and I can also go longer where I'm kind of spinning all the way around. And as it layers on top of the yellow, it's going to give it a nice kind of peachy tone. If I keep brushing over this again and again and again, eventually it kind of starts to make one color. And so if you want the streaks of color, you want to make sure that you don't brush over it too much. Now I'm just going to wipe my brush, make sure I don't have too much white on there. I'm going to grab some of this really bright magenta. Oh my gosh, I love that. That is a pretty color. And I am going to get just a teeny bit of water because my brush is just seeming a little bit dry. And a little bit of water is going to make the paint a little transparent. And when it's transparent, the color behind it will show through, and the color of the canvas, right, is primed white. So it's just going to make it look very vibrant. So then you could take some of your alizarin if you want some kind of brighter red in there. I'm going to need just a little bit more of each here. Sometimes it's better to start off with less paint. So you can always go back and grab more, but if you have too much left over, acrylic dries so quickly that you're not really able to reuse it unless you use saran wrap and you do that whole thing, and I'm not doing that today. Okay, so notice where the paint is thicker, looks darker. Where it's thinner with the water, looks lighter. And same thing, we're gonna go out past where we actually want the color to go. I'm gonna come down here. It's funny because the Alizarin Crimson looks so pink until you put this magenta with it, and then it looks like very red in comparison. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and clean my brush out. It's going to keep your water cleaner longer if you wipe any excess paint on your paper towel first. And then you're not taking all that paint to your water. Same thing, squeeze your brush out. Just leave it barely a little damp. And I'm going to get in there with my Phthalo Blue. And this color does look beautiful when your brush is just a little bit damp. That little bit of water really makes this color look so vibrant. So red and blue make purple, of course. So as we go over the top of some of our alizarin and our magenta, we're gonna get some purple. So you're gonna see that happen now. So I'm gonna start to brush over this edge where those colors meet. And I like mine to be kind of streaky. So I'm very, very lightly, I'm brushing over my pinks and my reds. And again, the more you brush, the more it'll blend. And you may want it to look really blended, and that's fine. Kind of to each their own with this sort of thing. There's no real right or wrong way to do it. And when you see these brush strokes up close, you're like, whoa, that's really noticeable. But then when you put your painting up on the wall where a painting is meant to be viewed, you realize that they kind of fade off into the background. And if you want to be painting the edges of your canvas as you go, you can. I usually save that till I'm done with the background, then the background can dry just a little bit. So I'm not going to clean my brush. I'm just going to get right in there with the black. And I'm going to hit up each corner. And then I'm going to start to brush over the blue. And because I want this painting to be very bright and vibrant, I'm not going to brush with this black on my brush anywhere here towards the center. If I did, it would start to mute the colors on the painting. Now, I love muted colors. I decorate in muted colors, so feel free to do that if that's what you're feeling. Just for this, I just want it to be really bright and vibrant. So I've got my black in there. Now I'm going to clean my brush off and get all that black out of there. And I really, really, really want to get all the black out, because what I'm going to do, I do not want black in my brush. I'm going to dab it on my paper towel. If your water is so muddy, it's just so filled with paint, then you can really see it when you dab your brush on your paper towel. You might want to get some fresh water for this next step. So if you love your canvas the way that it is, by all means, just leave it. That's totally fine. If you want to step back and look at it, you can do that as well. I'm going to add just a few more streaks. So I'm going to take some of my pale yellow, so some of my white, and some of my primary yellow again. And I'm going to add just a little bit of a glow. So I don't have a ton of paint on my brush, but I'm going to come down here and very lightly. See, when I press lightly, I make these teeny little marks, but if I press down really hard, I'm going to make kind of a big glob. So I'm very lightly going to come down here, and I'm going to add some yellow to the bottom here. And out into the blue. Wow, that looks cool. I like those colors together. If you don't like it, you can brush over it. Now while I've picked up some of the blue, I'm going to carry that up. So I barely have any blue on my brush. But it's just enough to have it really kind of stand out here. This light is really shining, isn't it? Just gonna tone that down just a hair, because that's really intense the way that's shining. And then I can add a little bit over here. If you're getting a lot of marks that look like the texture of a canvas, that just means your paint is very dry already. You can either add a little bit of water, or you can just allow that texture to be what it is. See here, I'm getting a little bit of that texture. And so at this point, the only thing I'm really seeing is that I want a little bit more of my magenta showing through right here, kind of making it kind of purple. Maybe I'll add a little bit more alizarin over here. On top of the blue, it looks so bright. And notice it looks round because I'm trying to keep all of my brush strokes in this circle. When I've taught paintings like this before, what can tend to happen is we get lots of U shapes. People find it more comfortable to just kind of go back and forth in a U. And there's really nothing wrong with that. You can do a U shape if you want to. There's really kind of no rules in painting. And what's great about painting is everybody's creative and everybody has their own vision. So if you want to do in a U shape, you can. And maybe that you're just kind of getting your coordination down. And then if you like something that's more round, you just kind of want to stick in these kind of circular brush strokes. Okay, so that's it now for my background. And it's gonna come out different every single time, right? And that's kind of what's beautiful about painting too. So I'll just show you my little practice that I did beforehand. You can see how the background looks there, and now it's getting a little bit brighter and clearer. And that's just based on the way that I'm feeling and the way that it's kind of expressing itself. If you wanted to add more teal, this yellow and this blue is going to give you more kind of a teal appearance. Okay, so next I'm going to start on the tree. So if you want to, before you start on the tree, if you want to let your background get just a little bit dry, it does not need to be completely dry. But if you want to get it a little bit dry, you can just work on painting your edges while it's drying, just coming along the sides there. And some people like to paint the edges just one solid color. I always like to wrap it around because I like it to look like the painting kind of continues beyond the canvas there. So I'm going to drop that brush off in my water. And I'm going to get out my pointed round brush, size 12. I'm going to dip that in my water. And with any of these other brushes, you don't need to squeeze the brush out with the other hand. You can just kind of press it on the side of your glass lightly, dab it on your paper towel a little bit. And when I'm painting a tree, sometimes I even like to add a little bit of extra water into my black paint. So if you wanted to do a brown tree, you could either get out some brown paint, or you can mix together red, yellow, and blue till it gets to the brown that you like. I'm just going to use black. And adding just a teeny bit of water here to my paint, it's going to give me smooth lines. All right, so how this brush works is if you press down really hard, you're going to get a super thick line. Look how thick that is. If I very lightly glide along the canvas, I'm going to get a very thin line. So you just want to keep in mind that the more pressure you apply, the thicker your line is going to get. With the tree, it's better to start out thin, and you can always make it thicker, but if you make it too thick, you kind of have to, work with that and make it work. So trees are kind of like the letter Y. So you always kind of start off with a central, let's see where I have some good space here, with the central branch, and from there we can turn that into a letter Y. And you can kind of go on and on adding on Ys. It's going to look more natural if you start on the previous branch and take off from there. If you start out and come in, that kind of gives a different shape. So I don't usually do that. I usually start on the branch and take off from there. All right, so for this tree, I'm going to have it start from, I'm going to kind of come bottom center here, and I'm going to remember to not apply too much pressure at first. And I'm going to come from the bottom, and I'm going to slant upwards, reaching for the top right corner, and I'm releasing the pressure as I work my way up so it gets thinner and thinner and thinner. And now I'm going to have this side of the tree kind of branch off in the opposite direction. So what's kind of cool is my paint is not completely dry, and that's giving the branches a really cool look. So I'm going to grab a little bit more water, mix that in with my paint here, and now I'm going to start at the bottom again. I'm going to go about 1 inch over to make my tree trunk a little bit thicker. I'm going to come off, and I'm going to take off from there. The more wiggly you make your branches, the more kind of creepy they look, which I love creepy trees, so I like to make it wiggly, but it's kind of up to you. So I'm just kind of coming off each of those and adding on a letter Y. I'm going to go ahead and use my brush right now to fill in my tree trunk. And if you want to use some short brush strokes, that can make it look more textured like bark. and your tree trunk can go off the bottom edge of the canvas if you want to. And you may find that you hit a point where this brush seems really large, and that's because your brush is fully loaded with paint, and that can make it a little bit difficult to do skinny branches. So at this point here, my brush is very, very loaded with paint, especially because I was demonstrating over here. So I'm just gonna take my brush and I'm gonna clean it out in my water so that I can get a fresh start. So I'm just gonna dab my brush lightly, come back to my black paint, and now I've got watery black paint, almost kind of using it like ink, but my brush isn't completely loaded where it's so full that it's making really thick lines. So I'm gonna come and go over this branch again, and I'm gonna branch off of there and add a Y. And the key with trees is you want all of the branches to look different, right? If they're all the same, they're all 1 inch long and they're all kind of lined up perfectly, nature doesn't usually work like that. Nature is beautiful and balanced and at times symmetrical, but usually has a lot of variation. So maybe some are really, really short, and maybe some are a little bit longer. And what always helps with the tree is if the trunk is the thickest part, okay? So I've got a thicker trunk. And I'm barely pressing my brush down. So with this painting, I want the branches to look like they're kind of reaching and wrapping around this glow here. So I'm gonna start that now. Come over here. And you could use your detail brush for this if you wanted to. Like they're just kind of wrapping in towards the center. So one thing I want to see is I want to see one of these branches a little bit longer. So I'm going to come in over here. And I'm going to make this just a little bit thicker right here. Make sure my edge is kind of wobbly there. Do some short brush strokes. So because I had some wet paint in here, I didn't let my background dry completely. It kind of added some white to my paint, making it look a little bit gray. I actually love the way that looks. It's one of, you know, happy little accidents. But if you don't like it, you can go over it in black. You can let it dry a little bit longer and then go over it in black. Oops, I cut a little bit of blue there, so I'm just gonna go over that again. So now, if you wanted one side of your tree to have a shadow, you could add more black to one side. And then I'm also going to show you how you would do a highlight. So if you want to do a highlight, wipe off any excess black paint. You're going to clean out your brush and your water. Dab it on your paper towel. And you could do your highlight in any color that's light and bright. You know, you could even do a red highlight if you wanted to. I am doing some pale yellow, just mixing up a tint here. And because this isn't a hyper realistic painting and it's just fun and whimsical, you could really add the highlight anywhere you wanted to. You could put all your highlights on the left of each branch, you could put all of them on the right. You can put them on the branch, whatever's closest to your little central glow. And they don't need to go everywhere. Maybe you want them just in some areas. Maybe you want to do them out here on the branches that have the darker background. Maybe right here where the tree trunk comes up. It's kind of totally up to you. Okay. So for the next step, you are going to want your background and your paint to be pretty dry, and you are going to need some clean water. So at this point, just kind of finish your painting, get it to where you like it, and then go ahead and clean your water out and make sure you have some clean white paint and a little bit of yellow mixed together. And then we'll start the next step. All right, so I've got some clean water. And the next thing we're going to do is we're gonna add on some little orbs. Who doesn't love orbs? That's just fun. So we're gonna take our little detail brush. You can dip it in your water. Doesn't really matter if you dab off excess water because it barely holds any water as it is anyway. So you could really do your orbs in any color. I'm gonna do pale yellow orbs, but feel free to do whatever you feel. And don't forget to have a little bit of clean, fresh white paint. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take some of my pale yellow, so white and yellow mixed together. And then I'm just gonna start to place my orbs. So again, keeping it random, keep in mind sometimes less is more. Take a step back and look at it. Some big, some small. So really as much variation as you can do, the better. You can even, if one of your branches didn't come out the way that you wanted it to, you could use an orb to cover that up. But basically we're just painting little spots. So I'm gonna have some that go over the top of a branch, some that are kind of floating off on their own. And we are gonna put a little dab of white paint in the center after, so don't worry if it's not looking as bright as you thought it was going to. So I've got 1, 2, 3, do a little one up here, 4, 5, I've got 6. So about 6 on each side, I think is what I'm gonna do. But there's not a lot of rhyme or reason to what I'm doing right now. It's just trying to make it very, very random. Okay, so now I'm gonna take my brush and I'm gonna wipe it off so that there's barely any paint on it. And now I'm gonna do circles, circular brush strokes around my little orb. And you're gonna catch barely just a teeny bit of paint. That's what you want to happen. And if you pick up something that was wet from the background, that's okay. You can just wipe it off or clean your brush out. And that's gonna make it look like it's glowing. So you're basically picking up some of that paint. You're kind of scrubbing it outwards. If you have too much paint on your brush, it's just gonna grow bigger and bigger and bigger, which is fine. But you want not too much paint so that it just kind of uses that texture of the canvas to just create a little glow on there. And again, up close, it's gonna look different. And you can make the glow go out really far, you know, even a whole inch if you wanted to. I caught some wet black paint there. If that happened to you and you wanted to tone it down, you could just add some pale yellow over it, or you could leave it and just let it be what it is. Okay, so now I'm going to take plain white and I'm just going to do a little dot in the center. And you don't have to do all of them even. Maybe you just want to do plain white. Some of them, especially in the ones that are kind of have a yellow background behind them anyway, the white is going to help you actually see them. So you can see how those are looking more like they're glowing now that I add the white dot. So especially this one up here, look at, it's very yellow in that area already. You pretty much can't see it. But if I just dab some white, you can actually see it. Now, if you're still kind of getting the balance down in your hands, if your painting is dry, you can rest the side of your hand on the canvas. If it's wet though, you know, make sure to hold your hand above and you kind of got to just balance there a little bit. So you could also use white to add a little extra glow. If you wanted it to really stand out, you could come out further. Some rings of white. You can see how that really stands out now a lot more than it did before. Add another little one over here. Okay, so you could add in as many orbs as you wanted to. And then the last step is going to be doing a little bit of splatter. So again, maybe you like your painting just how it is. You don't want to do this, that's fine. If you want to do a little bit of splatter, it can look like stars in the background. So I'm going to take my brush with my clean water. If your water is tinted a little bit white or pale yellow, that's fine. But I'm taking my water and I'm going to go straight to my white paint. And I'm going to mix water and white paint together until it gets really soupy, like melted ice cream. Really soupy. You want your brush really loaded up with the paint. And I would practice this on something else before you go onto your canvas so that you can kind of get a feel for the technique and know that the paint, it's splattering, so it will splatter, and acrylic paint does not come off of basically anything, and especially not clothes. So just be careful with that. So I'm going to hold my brush with my left hand. I'm right-handed, and I'm going to tap this part right below the bristles. I'm not going to tap on the actual brush because I would just get it all over my hand, but right below there is where I'm going to tap, and you're going to see the brush is going to kind of bounce up and down, and it's going to make teeny little dots. Now, if they look really big and watery, might have just a teeny bit too much water, and you can mix it in your paint again. And I kind of like it in clusters, so maybe there's a little cluster there, and maybe there's none. You can also go over your tree, just make it look like it's kind of glittering. It's one of the most fun techniques ever. If I get closer, I can kind of aim more for one area to get it kind of layered. And I don't want mine too big. I want mine kind of smaller. If you get some that are really big, you can just dab with the paper towel. It's just water. It's no problem. And that is it. So this is a very simple, easy, fun painting that you can do in basically any colors. And when you're finished, if you haven't painted your edges, don't forget to paint those. If you have any questions or comments, you can let me know down below. And I want to thank you so much for painting with me. And I hope that you have a wonderful day.